dos best-sellers mais surpreendentes da última década, O Capital no Século XXI, do economista francês Thomas Piketty, já vendeu mais de 3 milhões de exemplares em todo o mundo. Só que transformar o livro em filme não era tarefa fácil. Afinal, o livro parte de anos e anos de pesquisa de Piketty, que viaja até o século XVIII para concluir, entre outras reflexões, que a tendência do capitalismo é a de gerar um círculo vicioso de desigualdade e uma concentração cada vez maior de riqueza. Esse processo, entre outras consequências, pode até ameaçar os sistemas democráticos do mundo. E como tratar no cinema desses conceitos que o autor francês aborda no livro? A solução do diretor neozelandês Justin Pemberton foi construir uma narrativa ágil, com referências à cultura pop e também com entrevistas com os mais importantes especialistas em economia do mundo. Assim, O Capital no Século XXI, o filme, consegue conduzir um público amplo por uma viagem pela história que contrapõe a riqueza e o poder de um lado e do outro, o progresso social e as desigualdades. Conversamos com Justin Pemberton sobre o processo de filmagem, sobre as consequências da pandemia para o mundo atual e também sobre a importância de dialogar com o público jovem. Confira.
I think that really 20th century model of communism versus capitalism has produced a horrible hangover in the 21st century, where this idea of any kind of equality or any kind of redistribution is seen as evil. I think it's an easy narrative to be for people in political power to promote. We have this distorted perception where I think it's very easy to look at people who we feel superior to or people who we see as below us and blame them for everything and think that they're coming for us for whatever we've got. But we've got this blind spot to all the people at the top that actually have everything and are pulling everything and telling us, watch out for this guy, he's trying to take something from you. Don't look at me. It's a very crazy situation, and it's kind of in psychology they call it a fundamental attribution error, where we have this ability to try and put blame on other people for our situation, but have a blind spot to other things that are going on.
So it's also a matter of like identity. You know what I mean? Like we are in a crisis, identity crisis, I would say, like the working class.
I mean, that's the thing. It's the political narrative and the political stories we're told are very easy to be distorted through a lens where we look at ourselves and start judging ourselves against everybody else that's around us.
But the idea of this film began when you read the book of Thomas Piketty. How did the book move you, touch you?
Countries that, like where I'm from, New Zealand, have traditionally been seen quite an egalitarian meritocracy where, hard work and study can get you to the top and people can succeed. And I was becoming aware of a shift in inequality in New Zealand. And was interested in that. And that's kind of what brought me to the Thomas Piketty book, because it was his narrative that that capital concentrates when it's left to roam free, when it's unregulated. And within the globalized context, that's creating wealth on a scale never seen before in human history. And we're in danger of circling back to the 18th century style old Europe, where a few people owned everything and everybody else had to rent their lives. Now, obviously, in developing countries like Brazil, that's even more ingrained in terms of inequality. But it's interesting to see that the countries that consider themselves developed are actually slipping further into that model as well. I think what's interesting as well is globalization has led to this position where the wealth between countries has actually diminished. So it has created a more equal world in the sense of, you look at countries like China and the wealth that they've got, and so between a country, it's become more equal. But within countries, it's become much more disparate. So it's concentrated more and more and more. So even in countries like Germany or New Zealand, you're getting much more inequality because of globalization, even though across the planet, growth can be achieved between countries, but it doesn't get shared between the citizens. Globalization has created an atmosphere where one or two people can soak up the world's wealth, and that's, Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos.
Do you think during the pandemic, everything got worse in a sense? Because the banks here are richer, you know what I mean? Really?
Yeah, and historically, actually, pandemics have been bad for inequality. They have made it worse. People who have resources are able to concentrate those to protect themselves. And when people don't have jobs and when people can't go to work, they just keep sliding further and further down. And again, it creates opportunities for people with resources to be able to adapt, to be able to change the way they do business because they can afford to change their operation. So someone like Amazon has just gone through the roof through the pandemic, the wealth that has been generated. And again, it's global. So all over the world, people are now, using Amazon in a way that they didn't even have to before, whereas the shop down the road, which by the way also has to pay tax, which Amazon doesn't do. The one thing that the pandemic does though, is it does create an awareness, I think, amongst people. And it could, and I'm hopeful that this is one of the cases in Brazil, it could actually start to be the thing that really pushes people out into the street to force change and mobilize and become organized and think this is, too much. Things are going to change now. Unfortunately, it's crises that usually people, try and get through and make things work until they just can't anymore. And that's when the revolution starts. And unfortunately, people in positions of power shouldn't hold on to power until a revolution overthrows them. They should be smart enough and wise enough and be able to see through history that, you need to actually start to address these issues or it's going to be pandemonium. The pandemic has had a lot of varied effects all over the world, I think. And I think the next few years will really sort of settle which way the world goes. Probably the next huge global financial crisis will be related to the environment. People were talking about this in the 1970s and trying to push solar power and wind turbines and alternatives to how to fuel cars. The technology wasn't invested in, and the oil companies themselves did research into this, particularly Shell, and it knew about climate change, and it knew about the problems with oil, and they actively campaigned for nothing to happen, to suppress the information, to suppress the science, to make sure that the world didn't adapt. But there is enough energy in the Sahara Desert from the sun to fuel the entire world. We just haven't worked out how to harness it and distribute it. But these aren't problems that can't be solved. They just haven't been solved because there's been very little investment in there. So, I think the answers are all there. It's just how we get to a place. It's crossing that bridge that's going to be the tricky part, and that's probably going to, have some really treacherous years in front of it.
And your language, your movie language, it's really for young people.
Yeah, that was one of the first conversations with Thomas, was why a movie? A movie for the people who didn't read the book or didn't finish the book or found the book a little too much to lacking a little clarity. So the whole point was to make a film that covered the ideas from the book, but to talk to people that wouldn't read the book.
How was the Piketty reaction when you told him you would make a movie out of his book? Oh, if it was like this, that it happened.
Well, there were a few people that were all trying to make a movie of the book. So it wasn't just us. So we were in a kind of competitive situation. I was told to just go and write it. Just write what you see, develop it into a film. So I, was writing and sort of reading and writing and sort of created this, I can't even remember how long, it was like 30 pages, probably sort of 40-page script, which was quite loose, but it was divided into 3 acts, which was, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And I put all the pop culture in there, and I put, music quotes and movie quotes and photos of The Simpsons and everything. So it was sort of this big, colorful pop document, and sent it to him. And the email came back. I think the first line was, I think I'm going to like this movie very much. So that was, and then we progressed from there. So that was great. That was great. I don't know what the other people's treatment looked like. I never asked him, but he liked it, and so could see a reason for making the movie, which I think was the most important thing. As we got to the parts of the history where there was archive, where you could actually see the film or the video, it changed amazingly how clear and how the ability to get what was going on. And now we're moving further and further into history. Everything is going to be archived and documented. We're going to know exactly what went on, what conversations were had. It is all going to be there. And that will allow people in the future to actually get a much clearer and nuanced understanding of really what happened.
Esse foi Justin Pemberton conversando com a gente sobre o capital no século XXI. Fique ligado que tem muito mais conversa sobre esse complexo mundo contemporâneo ainda aqui na Mostra Ecofalante 2021.